Hi there, Dr. Rob Barrington here with some more nutritional advice. I wanted to talk today about dietary nitrates. Now I thought this was quite important because I don't think it's something that many people consider. Dietary nitrates come mainly from our vegetable intakes. Now it's very important to understand the difference before we enter into this discussion, the difference between dietary nitrites and dietary nitrates. Dietary nitrites have been even in the mainstream media because of the connection between nitrosamines and gut cancer. Now, dietary nitrates are different, and there is slight nuances, so it's important to understand the differences. Nitrites are one of the sources of dietary nitrites. With an I is sodium nitrite, which is added to processed meat. When we take in processed meat, the meat is preserved with sodium nitrite. That prevents the bacteria growing on the meat, and when we consume that meat, the nitrites are converted in our gut to nitrosamines, and those nitrosamines may be able to cause an increase in oxidative stress in our guts, and that may be a cause of the initiation of cancers. So there is an association between eating lots of processed meats and gut cancer. Now what I'm talking about today is actually dietary nitrates. Now, nitrites and nitrates can be interconverted. Dietary nitrate has an extra oxygen. If you remove one of those oxygens and you reduce it, you produce dietary nitrite. So there are ways of interconverting these chemicals, but what I'm actually talking about is the nitrates that we get from our vegetables. Now, vegetables have been shown to be protective of cardiovascular disease. There are many reasons why vegetables and fruits as well may be protective of cardiovascular disease. For example, they contain fibre, and that may have beneficial glycemic effects. They contain vitamins and minerals. The vitamins, for example, may be antioxidants, or they may supply cofactors for particular pathways. And also they are rich in phytonutrients, and many of those phytonutrients have been identified as antioxidants. Now, those are some of the theories that have been put out to explain why fruits and vegetables may be protective of cardiovascular disease. Obviously, if you eat lots of fruits and vegetables, you tend not to eat lots of the other types of foods that may actually be a cause of cardiovascular disease. So that's another reason that fruits and vegetables may be protective. However, another reason may be the fact that vegetables particularly do contain high amounts of dietary nitrates. Now, plants need nitrates to grow. Nitrogen is one of the requirements of a plant. It's one of their essential components they need to be able to grow. And certain fruits and vegetables do contain high amounts of nitrates. Now, those vegetables particularly that grow under the ground, root vegetables, tend to be very good at accumulating nitrates. And when we eat those vegetables, so for example beetroot or carrots, the nitrates within the vegetables are converted very quickly in our mouths through the activity of bacteria. They have particular enzymes, and they are able to convert nitrates into nitrites. So you can see here, this is where the crossover with processed meats is, because we've actually taken in a source of nitrates and we've produced nitrites. Now we swallow the food after we've chewed it, and those nitrites they pass into our gut and then they're absorbed. Now the dietary nitrites, when they're in our circulation, are able to be reduced through various enzymes which are collectively called nitrite reductases, and those nitrite reductases are able to produce nitric oxide. Now, nitric oxide is a very important signal molecule in our cells. It's used for many things. It possibly has anti-inflammatory effects, and possibly also able to direct immune cells. But one of the things it's been identified, one of the functions it has been identified for nitric oxide is that it's able to relax our blood vessels, and this has been known for a long time. Medicinally, nitrates can be given in the form of nitroglycerine. It can be given in order to be able to relax blood vessels. So this has been known for a long time.
Fruits and vegetables contain nitrates. They're converted to nitrites in our mouth. Those nitrites are then absorbed, and these nitrites are converted to nitric oxide. Now, nitric oxide, when it's in the endothelial cells of our arteries, causes them to relax, particularly when our blood is flowing through the blood vessels, and something called flow-mediated dilation occurs, where the blood flows, and those blood vessels need to relax in response to that flow in order to prevent an increase in blood pressure. Now, what happens when we get cardiovascular disease is quite interesting. The traditional explanation for cardiovascular disease was cholesterol, saturated fat causes atherosclerosis, that causes a blockage in the arteries, and that causes cardiovascular disease. I think this old paradigm is slowly being deconstructed, and I don't think the evidence really fits that this is the cause of cardiovascular disease. More recently, people have been investigating cardiovascular disease in terms of looking at it through a dysfunction in the endothelium of arteries. And one of the suggestions is that arteries are required to dilate, obviously, in response to flow in order to prevent pressure increases. And the compound that allows that to occur is nitric oxide. High levels of nitric oxide are required as a signal molecule in order to be able to allow this flow-mediated dilation. And nitric oxide in endothelial cells is formed through an enzyme called nitric oxide synthase. Now, high levels of oxidative stress in your body inhibit nitric oxide synthase, and that in turn decreases the nitric oxide in your endothelial cells of your arteries. So if you have a lot of oxidative stress, if you have a poor diet, if you're stressed, if you have an unhealthy lifestyle and your oxidative stress levels are high, your nitric oxide synthase levels will decrease. The nitric oxide synthase will be inhibited, your nitric oxide levels will go down, and your blood vessels will not be able to respond correctly to the flow of blood through them, and this can cause changes in blood pressure, it can cause changes in the flow pattern, and this may be one of the initiators of atherosclerosis. So it's very important to understand this is still very misunderstood, not fully understood, and we're still trying to piece together what exactly is happening. But this is one of the latest the ideas in terms of the formation of cardiovascular disease. Now, if this is true, this would explain why antioxidants are protective of cardiovascular disease. The antioxidants would decrease the oxidative stress. This would allow nitric oxide synthase levels to increase. This would increase the amount of nitric oxide in your endothelial cells, and this would return your arteries to their correct function. And many studies have looked at the provision of antioxidants in the diet, all sorts of antioxidants from cinnamon all the way through to berries, and generally the antioxidants, when they've been looked at in whole diets, have been looked at as well. The Mediterranean diet, for example, when you supply high amounts of antioxidants in the diet, there is an improvement in the flow-mediated dilation, and this is because of an increase in nitric oxide levels in your arteries. Now let's get back to nitrates. We take in the nitrates, they're converted to nitrites, those nitrites are absorbed, and those nitrites are then through nitrite reductases are converted into nitric oxide. And as you can see, as I've just explained, nitric oxide is required for correct endothelial function. So this is another reason why fruits and vegetables may be particularly beneficial to your health. The antioxidant components of them, yes, they do appear to have these beneficial effects, but when you give dietary nitrates to subjects, they also experience improvements in flow-mediated dilation. And I think this has been something that's been overlooked. It's often taken for granted that fruits and vegetables, are good for you because they contain vitamins. They're good for you because they contain antioxidants. But there are many other things in fruits and vegetables. And you've got to remember that these dietary nitrates, 80% of dietary nitrates come from vegetables in our diet. So fruits are not even the best source of nitrates, it's vegetables, and particularly within the vegetables, it's the root vegetables that are able to contain, accumulate these nitrates to higher levels. Beetroot is one example, carrots for example, and there are other vegetables. You can look up on the internet tables of the nitrate contents of vegetables, and you'll find that they're very high in those that tend to grow in the soil. And I thought this was interesting, and not many people have considered this. So if you're considering increasing your fruits and vegetables, if you look at increasing your fruits and vegetables based on which have the best antioxidants, that is one component of fruits and vegetables. But another component of looking at fruit and vegetables is, for example, the nitrate content. And what I think this nicely illustrates, bringing this to this discussion to a close, is that if you fixate on one particular chemical within a plant, you often get poor results to your health, or results that don't really represent what you should be getting, because you're not looking at the big picture. There are many things in fruits and vegetables that are beneficial, and they all work in different ways. Fibre, for example, may have cardioprotective effects, but it works in a completely different way to the antioxidants that are in fruits and vegetables. This is one reason why eating whole fruits and vegetables is more important than eating the single components as supplements. And there are probably many components within fruits and vegetables that we haven't even identified, and we have no understanding of the mechanism by which they are protective. And this is why I've always said that if you can get your nutrients from food, you should do, because you're guaranteeing that you're getting the components that are healthy, but you're also possibly getting components that we haven't even identified, and we have no mechanism to understand how they work. And dietary nitrates, I think, is one component that most people overlook in fruits and vegetables. So yes, they are very good sources of vitamins, they are very good sources of minerals, and they do contain phytonutrients that are antioxidants, but there are other components in fruits and vegetables that are worth considering. So when you in the mainstream press, when you hear about dietary nitrates and dietary nitrites, they're generally given negative connotations, and the sodium nitrite that is added to processed meats may be one of the components that is a cause of cancer, but it's very difficult to make these links, because those people that eat a lot of processed meats also probably have very unhealthy diets generally. And so when you measure a population that has a high intake of processed meats, and you find that they're getting more, that their rates of cancer are much higher than the general population, it's very easy to make the assumption that it's the processed meats that are causing the effect. But it could be other components of their diet. And some studies that have looked at the effects of processed meats on gut cancer have found that the association is actually quite weak. So I think these dietary nitrites and dietary nitrates are actually a little bit of a double-edged sword. There are probably very protective effects of. There are other factors within vegetables that are protective. For example, one of the ways that the way that dietary nitrites are damaging is because they're converted to nitrosamines in the gut, and they have to have their pro-carcinogenic effect in the gut. Now, fruits and vegetables also contain antioxidants. So when you consume vegetables with a source of nitrite, for example with processed meats, you prevent the conversion of those nitrites into nitrosamines. Vitamin C has been researched extensively with this effect. If you take vitamin C with processed meats, the dietary nitrites, the sodium nitrite within the processed meat, can't be converted into nitrosamines so readily, because the vitamin C is a reducing agent, and there must be oxidation there for this conversion to happen. So taking a diet as a whole, we can see that dietary nitrites and dietary nitrates may have important effects in humans, because they are naturally in our diet. Even if you don't eat processed meats, you do have quite a large intake of these dietary nitrites and dietary nitrates. And remember, they are interconverted. Dietary nitrate is simply nitrate is simply nitrite with an extra oxygen, and these molecules can be readily interconverted whether they're in a reducing or an oxidative environment, which obviously the gut with its acid, its alkali, there's temperature changes, it's really a chemical reactor down there, and things are very easily converted from one thing to another. So looking at the big picture, there are beneficial effects to consuming dietary nitrates, and therefore this is something that should be considered. It's one of the possible reasons why fruits and vegetables are healthy. It's one of the reasons they may be protective of cardiovascular disease, and it's one of the reasons that when you consider fruits and vegetables, you should always get them in their whole state, so that you get all of these components together, because holistically that's probably how they have their best effect. So I hope that was interesting and helpful. It's another facet to why nutrition is so interesting and so misunderstood. If you have any comments on this video, please leave them in the comments box below, and I will always try to reply to those comments. And if you have any questions and you want to ask me or request a video, please also put them in the comments box below. If you could like this video, if you've enjoyed it, that would be very helpful for my channel. And if you visit my blog, www.robertbarrington.net, there are many articles there on dietary nitrates and nitrites if you want some further information. So I'll see you next week for another video, and in the meantime, take care.